Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
Great.
Um,
Looking forward to it.
this book, I think, kind of flips the script on how we think about trauma.
Right.
It's not just in our heads. It lives in our bodies,
Yeah.
and it changes how we experience the world and our relationships and even our health.
Yeah.
So we're going to be kind of diving into the science and the stories that make this book so impactful. You ready to unpack this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
Okay, great.
The book starts by really driving home how common trauma is.
Yeah.
Dr. van der Kolk shares that 1 in 5 Americans have been molested a quarter, come from homes with alcoholism.
Wow.
These numbers highlight that trauma's reach is far wider than many realize.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to start.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you realize this isn't some niche topic.
Yeah.
This touches so many lives.
Right.
So what comes next?
So the book then delves into how trauma changes us. It explains that our brains have a threat detection system, but trauma puts it on high alert,
Oh,
even when we're safe.
right.
It's like a smoke detector going off constantly,
Yeah.
leaving you feeling on edge, waiting for the next bad thing to happen.
Oh, gosh.
This is where the idea of the body keeping the score really comes into play.
So it's not just a feeling.
Mm.
It's a physical state. Like our bodies are literally holding on to the trauma.
Yeah, it really is.
Does the book talk about how this manifests in people's lives?
Yeah, so Dr. van der Kolk describes how this state of hypervigilance can make it hard to focus,
Yeah.
to sleep, or even connect with others.
Oh, wow.
We might jump at small sounds,
Uh-huh.
overreact to minor setbacks, or constantly scan for danger,
Right.
even in safe environments. It's
Yeah.
like our bodies are stuck in survival mode long after the threat has passed.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about, bad memories.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how our whole system is reacting to the world. So if trauma is so deeply ingrained, how does the book approach healing?
Well, this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Dr. van der Kolk challenges the idea that simply talking about trauma is enough.
Right.
He emphasizes that because trauma is held in the body, we need therapies that address that physical response.
Right.
And this leads him to explore some really innovative approaches.
Like what? Give us some examples.
One that really stands out is EMDR,
Okay.
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Oh.
It involves having the patient focus on the traumatic memory while moving their eyes back and forth.
Okay.
This might sound strange.
Yeah.
But it helps reprocess the memory, reducing its emotional intensity.
So instead of just reliving the trauma in your mind,
Yeah.
you're using this physical action to help the brain reframe it.
Exactly.
Interesting.
The book even shares a case study about Kathy, who attempted suicide multiple times before EMDR.
Oh, wow.
It shows how powerful this approach can be for people who haven't found relief through traditional talk therapy.
That's incredible. It really highlights how we need to think outside the box when it comes to healing trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other therapies like this that the book covers?
Yes. Another one is neurofeedback, which is basically biofeedback for the brain.
Okay.
It uses real-time displays of brain activity to teach people how to regulate their own brain waves.
So it's like having a window into your own brain and learning how to control it.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting.
It can be really helpful for calming those overactive threat detection circuits that we talked about earlier.
Uh-huh.
It's like retraining your brain to respond to stress in a healthier way.
So we're seeing this theme emerge.
Mm-hmm.
Healing from trauma isn't just about talking, it's about addressing the physical impact as well.
Yes.
Where does the book go from here?
Dr. van der Kolk then takes us deeper into the mind-body connection, dedicating a whole chapter to how trauma affects our physical well-being.
Okay.
He explains that it can manifest in everything from chronic pain and digestive issues to autoimmune disorders and even heart disease.
Wow. I never would have guessed the connection was that strong.
Yeah, it's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah.
He explains how trauma can dysregulate our nervous system, leading to chronic inflammation and a whole host of physical problems.
Gosh.
It's like our bodies are constantly running a marathon,
Right.
even when there's no race.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why simply talking about trauma might not be enough.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find ways to calm our bodies down to reestablish that sense of safety.
Exactly. And that's where things like yoga and mindfulness come in.
Yoga, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I usually think of it as exercise, but I'm starting to see how it could play a role in trauma recovery.
Right. It's about developing a deeper awareness of your body's sensations and how they relate to your emotions.
Okay.
It's not about pushing away uncomfortable feelings, but learning to listen to what your body is trying to tell you.
So it's almost like a form of self-compassion, learning to be present with whatever's happening in your body without judgment.
Precisely. And Dr. Vanderkolk shares a story about Annie, who initially struggled with even the slightest touch because it triggered her trauma.
Ah.
But through yoga, she gradually learned to understand and process those sensations, reclaiming a sense of ownership over her body. It's really quite inspiring.
Wow, that's powerful. And I think it speaks to the idea that healing isn't just about the mind, it's about reintegrating the mind and body.
Yes.
What comes next in the book?
Well, we're just scratching the surface here, but before we move on, I think it's worth highlighting that even though we're focusing on the physical aspects of trauma,
Okay.
Dr. Vanderkolk doesn't dismiss the importance of talk therapy.
Good point.
Yeah.
So it's not an either situation, but rather finding a combination that works best for each individual.
Exactly. And that's why he also explores other approaches like expressive arts therapies, which can provide a safe and creative outlet for processing emotions that might be difficult to put into words.
That makes sense. Sometimes talking isn't enough. We need other ways to access and release those deep-seated emotions.
Right.
Where does the book go from here?
Well, now we get into a really interesting concept, the power of play.
Play.
Yeah.
As in like kids playing.
Yes, when we're playing, we're fully present in the moment.
Okay.
We're not dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
Oh.
It allows us to tap into a part of ourselves that might have been shut down by trauma, that sense of joy, spontaneity, and connection.
It's like giving our nervous system a break from all that hypervigilance.
Exactly, and it helps us reconnect with a sense of aliveness that might have been lost.
This is also fascinating. The body keeps the score really is giving us a whole new language for understanding and addressing trauma.
I think so.
What's next on this deep dive?
Well, there's one more crucial aspect of Dr. Vanderkolk's approach that we need to discuss.
Okay.
And it's all about the power of relationships.
Okay.
But we'll save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. We've covered so much ground already, and I'm eager to hear more about this relational piece. We'll be back soon to explore how connection can be a powerful force for healing.
Okay, sounds great.
Welcome back. Last time we were exploring how the body keeps the score, challenges us to think about trauma differently.
Yeah.
Not just as a mental thing, but something deeply embedded in our bodies.
Right. And we were about to dive into the role of relationships in healing, which is really at the heart of Dr. Vanderkolk's approach.
Okay.
He argues that connection isn't just nice to have, it's crucial for recovering from trauma.
So it's not just about individual therapies like EMDR or yoga.
Right.
It's about the people in our lives, too.
Exactly. He explains that secure attachments with family, friends, therapists can actually help rewire our brains.
Wow.
And regulate our nervous systems.
So those positive connections can help undo some of the damage trauma causes, like an antidote to the constant fight-or-flight mode.
Precisely when we feel safe and supported, our bodies can start to relax, allowing us to access joy, playfulness, connection. Things trauma might have shut down.
That's a powerful idea. Those relationships becoming a safe haven to heal in. Does the book give examples of how this works in practice?
Yeah, he shares many stories throughout. One that comes to mind is about a group therapy program for veterans.
Okay.
Many were initially resistant to sharing their experiences, but as trust built, they started to open up. This sense of shared vulnerability and understanding became a key part of their healing.
It's like that common ground, knowing you're not alone, allows for deeper healing than individual therapy could achieve.
Exactly, and this leads to a thought-provoking point Dr. Vanderkolk makes. The LACK of safe, nurturing connections can be a form of trauma itself.
So even without a specific event,
Yeah.
growing up feeling isolated or emotionally neglected, that can leave a similar mark.
Right, it goes back to the idea that trauma is about an individual's experience. It's not just what happens, but how we make sense of it and the support we have, or don't, to process it.
This is giving me a lot to think about, both for myself and how I interact with others. I'm curious, before we wrap up this deep dive, does the book offer any practical advice on cultivating these healing relationships?
It does touch on that, but it's not a how-to guide. Dr. Vanderkolk focuses more on the underlying science and the importance of creating environments where those connections can flourish. For example, he talks about the power of therapeutic communities.
What are those like?
They're groups where people can come together to share experiences, support each other, and practice skills for regulating their emotions. The key is that these communities provide a sense of safety, belonging, and shared understanding.
It's like taking the power of those supportive relationships we talked about earlier and amplifying it through a shared purpose.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that these communities aren't just for people who've experienced severe trauma. They can be beneficial for anyone struggling with emotional regulation, social anxiety, or even just feeling disconnected.
So it's a broader message about human connection as a fundamental need, not just a remedy for trauma.
Right. And it reminds us that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken,
Yeah.
it's about nurturing what makes us whole.
I love that it's giving you a much more hopeful perspective on recovery before we wrap up any final key takeaways from the book that we haven't touched on yet.
There are so many, but one that really stuck with me is the idea that trauma recovery is not about forgetting or erasing the past. It's about finding ways to integrate those experiences into our lives in a way that allows us to move forward.
So it's not about pretending it didn't happen. It's about finding a way to make peace with it.
Exactly. And that's where those supportive relationships, those therapies that address the body, and those practices like mindfulness and play come in. They give us the tools to process the pain, regulate our emotions, and ultimately reclaim our lives.
This has been such an insightful journey through The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Before we close, what's one thing you'd want listeners to reflect on after this deep dive?
I think the most important thing is to remember that healing IS possible trauma can leave deep wounds, but doesn't have to define us. There are so many paths to recovery, and with the right support and guidance, we can rediscover our capacity for joy, connection, and wholeness.
Welcome back to our final deep dive into The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding how trauma lives in our bodies to exploring different approaches to healing.
Right. And in the last part, we were talking about how crucial relationships and community are to that process, almost like an antidote to the isolation that trauma can cause.
Right, that really resonated with me. It's not just about individual work. It's about the power of connection to help us regulate our emotions and reclaim our lives.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this exploration of the book, what final key takeaways do you want listeners to walk away with?
The Body Keeps the Score is so rich with insights, it's hard to pick just a few. But I think for anyone who's been touched by trauma, whether personally or through someone they love, the most important message is that healing is possible.
That's such a powerful statement,
Yeah.
especially given how deeply trauma can affect us. Does Dr. Kolk offer any guidance on where to start that healing journey?
The book isn't a step-by-step guide. It's more about shifting our understanding of what trauma is and how it operates. But that shift in itself can be incredibly empowering. It helps us move away from shame and self-blame, realizing that our reactions are not signs of weakness, but rather the body's way of trying to protect us.
That's such a crucial point. It's not about judging ourselves for struggling. It's about understanding why we struggle and then seeking out the right support.
Exactly. And that's where the book's exploration of different therapies and approaches comes in. It's about finding what works for each individual, whether it's EMDR, yoga, neurofeedback, expressive arts, or a combination of approaches. But even beyond specific techniques, Dr. Kolk emphasizes that reconnecting with our bodies is essential.
We touched on that with yoga, but can you elaborate a bit more on what that means?
He talks about how trauma often leads us to disconnect from our physical sensations, either through numbing out or constantly feeling on edge. So part of healing is learning to pay attention to our bodies, to notice those sensations without judgment, and to start rebuilding that sense of safety and connection.
It's like we're learning to become friends with our bodies again, to listen to their wisdom instead of fearing them. Does the book offer any suggestions for how to cultivate that kind of awareness?
He talks about mindfulness practices, being present in the moment without judgment, noticing the sensations of our breath, the feeling of our feet on the ground. It's about gently bringing our attention back to the body over and over again until it starts to feel like a safe and familiar place again.
That makes so much sense. And it's a reminder that healing isn't just about the big dramatic breakthroughs. It's also about those small daily practices that help us feel more grounded and at home in ourselves.
Exactly, and that's a journey that takes time and patience. It's not about erasing the past, but about finding ways to integrate those experiences into our lives in a way that allows us to move forward.
This has been such a rich and thought-provoking deep dive into The Body Keeps the Score. Thank you for sharing your expertise and insights, and to our listeners, we hope this has sparked some new understanding about the nature of trauma and the many paths to healing. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. There is support available, and there's always hope. Keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep believing your own capacity to heal.